Everyone knows from the jingle that good things grow in Ontario. Much of that ends up on our tables as local, sustainably sourced meals, and increasingly, that bounty also fills our glasses. Locally produced wine, beer, and spirits are undergoing a true renaissance of late. Joining us now to explain what's been bubbling up around the province, we welcome Caroline Granger. She is winemaker and owner of the Grange of Prince Edward Vineyards and Estate Winery. Jan Westcott, CEO of Spirits Canada, and Matt Gibson, brand manager at the Nickel Brook Brewing Company in Burlington, Ontario. And it's great to have all three of you here with us at TVO tonight. Thank you. Let's just sort of go around the table here. Matt, I'll start with you and make sure everybody understands what it is that you folks do. First of all, craft beer is what?
Oh, that's a big question. There is no legal specific definition of craft beer, but generally speaking, I think it's identified as small batch, independently owned breweries that are making all natural beers. So no adjuncts, no artificial flavors or ingredients. We do use a lot of other ingredients besides sort of barley and hops and water. We're using, everything from orange peel to cardamom. We're putting things in barrels. So there's a huge variety of what that is, but generally speaking, it is independent, all natural, small batch beer.
Does it taste different from your typical Molson or Labatt's or Budweiser or whatever?
I mean, again, it depends. Beer is such a huge category. You can have everything from a light lager, which would be similar to a Canadian or a Heineken, to a bourbon barrel-aged Russian Imperial Stout, which is 14.5% dark, rich, malty chocolate, vanilla, oak notes. There's
malty chocolate?
Malty chocolate, coffee, cocoa, vanilla, bourbon, all sorts of things going on. So you can have, there's just a giant range of flavors.
Hang on, Matt. Are you serious? There's chocolate beer?
Oh yeah, there's Wellington Brewery up in Guelph makes a beautiful chocolate milk stout, which has a bit of lactose sugar in it, which gives it that sort of milky flavor as well. It's incredible. So
I got to get out more.
Yeah.
How big is the craft beer market compared to the giants?
So we, especially in Ontario, we're still a very small piece. I think the most recent stats show us about 5 to 6% of the total beer market in Ontario. However, we are the only growing segment of beer sales in Ontario. So beer. Canada-wide has actually shrunk over the last 5 years by about 3 to 4%, beer consumption that is. However, we as a craft beer industry in Ontario have grown 20 to 30% in sales year over year for the past 5-6 years.
Why do you think?
I think there's a few factors. I think people are really into eating and drinking local now. That's a much larger thing than it was 5-10 years ago, and people are recognizing that these small local breweries are doing things that the big guys aren't doing. They're paying more attention to ingredients. A lot of the big guys are using ingredients like high fructose corn syrup or rice flour to boost the alcohol content without adding much flavor or body, and we're not doing that. We're using all malts. A lot of it is Canadian malt. We're using a lot of local ingredients, and we're just focused more on quality than on quantity.
I think for the most part, though, the giant brewers are about 5% alcohol?
Generally speaking.
And craft beers?
Again, it can go anywhere from Bellwoods has what they call it, Stay Classy. I think it's 2.5%. It's their easy drinking session ale. Up to, again, we can have a 14-15% beer. Sam Adams in the States, their Utopias is something like 39. It's basically you drink it like port.
39%?
39% beer. Yeah.
Alcohol content in their beer.
It comes in a little copper kettle. It's like a reproduction of a brewing kettle, and yeah, you drink it like a port or a sherry. Like you have it with dessert. You have a little bit, and drink it at sort of room temperature. Huge variety. Any
misconceptions about the craft brewing business that we should know about?
I think the general idea of craft beer is super hoppy. The IPA is the most popular style of craft beer.
India Pale Ale?
India Pale Ales. Generally the American IPAs, so they're using hops that you're getting from the west coast of the United States and Canada. So a lot of very citrusy, piney, fruit-forward hop flavors, but a lot of bitterness. And that is a lot of what people associate with craft beer. But as I said, there's a huge variety. We make a great IPA, but we also make these great stouts. We make really nice lighter saisons and more fruit flavor beers. We do a lot of sour beers now. We did a sour Berliner Weiss with raspberries. It's very tart and fruit forward. So thinking craft beer equals bitter is a big misconception.
And let me do one more minute with you just on your business personally. How many people you got working there?
I think at last count we had about 38, 39 employees.
And you started with how many?
They started about 12 years ago with 3.
So you've done well.
Yes, well, we're one of the top 7 craft brewers in Ontario now.
Making a good profit?
We're that's another question. We're working on it. It is it's a thin margin game, especially with all the taxes and all the costs associated with running a production company, a production business, essentially. But we're getting there.
So you're not profitable yet?
We are profitable, yes, but we're not. We're not. We're
Stinking
not
millionaires.
Yeah, we're not. We're not buying lease tickets for all of our bars and restaurants, unlike some of the big guys.
Good to know. Okay, Caroline, you ready to go?
Sure.
Tell me what you do.
I grow grapes and make wine in Prince Edward County.
Whereabouts?
In Hillier, which is a forgotten village on the west side of the island. My father got the farm when I was a little girl. And about 17 years ago, I thought I'd try something new.
And this was it?
This was it.
Why do you
yes.
enjoy it?
I love the farming part. So that connection to the land, the being able to be there when my kids got off the bus was huge when they were growing. But building something brand new in a place that you know very well, seeing the change that Prince Edward County's undergone in the last 15 years has been a rare privilege.
It's boffo, isn't it, right now? I mean, it used to be...
It's getting pretty boffo.
Well, yeah.
It's pretty quiet this time of year, but summers are tremendously exciting.
Well, I just remember that if you wanted an Ontario wine, it was always Niagara Peninsula.
Exactly.
And now it's Prince Edward County as well. How many, any guess as to how many different wineries you've got out there now? I mean, it's probably a couple dozen.
45.
Oh, 45. Well past a couple dozen. Almost 4 dozen. What's a VQA winery?
So a VQA winery is a winery whose grapes in their bottle are 100% from Ontario. It's a quality standard. It's tremendously important for the small and medium-sized wineries in Ontario because it's a bar for us. It's our connection to terroir, to growing. Interestingly, there are now many regions in Ontario, and they're all within this system.
And are you VQA?
I'm VQA Prince Edward County.
You are, 100%.
100%, yes.
And what kind of wines do you make?
Lots.
I guess what I'm asking is, are you red and white and rosé?
Absolutely.
You are.
Red and white and rosé and sparkling. I grow 7 varietals on the farm, but the county probably has easily more than 10 or 12 represented well. Ontario has more than that. And I think it's important to say that what Ontario does well is still being discovered. We have exceptional sparkling wines, beautiful rosés, more reds, rich round reds than people expect.
And again, let me ask the same thing that I asked Matt. A misconception we may have about the wines that come out of Prince Edward County, what would that be?
That cool climate somehow means substandard. I think that that would be true generally for VQA wines, even though I hate to say it to you. Mm-hmm. The truth is that our culture in Ontario is still discovering wines from Ontario.
Is that a nice way of saying that we're still a bit snobby when it comes to Ontario wines?
It could be that.
Yeah?
It could be, or that we're
elsewhere?
still cautious.
Cautious.
Right? Canadians tend to think that everyone else does things better.
So we
right?
need to broaden our vista a little bit as it relates to wine.
I think everyone just needs to get out to wine country. Wine country will convince them. A trip, and most of the regions in Ontario are a day's, like hours away from Toronto or Ottawa. So visiting and seeing for yourself, the doors are open. Tasting bars are full of wonderful wines.
Seeing and tasting is believing.
I believe so.
Good. Thank you. Okay, Jan, here we go. I think everybody knows that we make beer in Ontario. They know we make wine in Ontario. They may not know that we actually make a lot of spirits in Ontario. So maybe we should start there. How much do we do?
We have been making spirits in Ontario for well over 200 years on a commercial basis since about the 1850s. We have been dominant on the global spirits business at different points in time. We were the largest whiskey sold in England for many years when there were some issues going on between England and Scotland.
So name some names that we would know.
Hiram Walker, Goodman Warts, Henry Corby, J.P. Weiser, famous names, all started in Ontario, and largely grew off the farm. So our original craft distillers were people like Henry Corby, who was actually a dairyman, and wanted to do something with his grain. We're an industry that's attached at the hip to the farm community, so we use grain to make spirits. Essentially, we make beer first, and then we distill it and make distillate, and then for things like whiskey, it goes into a barrel, and after a period of time, it comes out whiskey. And so our long-standing business, Ontario is the home of the industry in Canada, and certainly the powerhouse. We are, I think, the third or the fourth largest buyers of corn in the province. We're the largest buyer of rye in Canada. And we've had good fortune over the years in not just satisfying Canadians' requirements for spirits, but also exporting them all over the world.
How big a chunk of the market do Ontario-made products have?
The majority, but of all the spirits sold, we're about 60%. So more Ontarians and Canadians drink domestic spirits than imported spirits.
Got a dollar figure on that?
Well, last year, 2015, the LCBO turned over $1.7 billion to the government as net, and spirits represented almost $1 billion of that.
Spirits represent the majority of
Significantly, yeah.
the money that goes to the Treasury.
Right.
Okay. As a percentage of the Canadian economy, how big a deal is the spirits business?
We're about $1.5 billion contribution to Ontario's GDP. So about 6,000 full-time jobs in Ontario, and I say about $1.5 billion, and around, depending on the year, 225,000 metric tons of grain. So lots and lots of grain.
Lots of farmers depend on people drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
They do. Same question that I asked the two of them. What's the biggest misconception we have about the spirits business in Ontario?
I think in modern times, it's this notion that somehow spirits are different. There's these different types of alcohol, and they all have different effects. And what we're all coming to understand is they're pretty much all the same. They all have a base of alcohol. They all bring different produce into play. So if you go back 125 years, most of the grain that was used to make whiskey in Ontario, for example, was wheat, and it was the lesser quality. And over time, that's changed, so it's now the highest quality. And whether it's grapes, whether it's barley or malt, all of our businesses were a reflection of the farm community trying to figure out how to gain more value out of what they were growing. And beer and spirits and wine represent far more value add in terms of that local produce, and it's local produce going forward. So people started making beer because in the old days, the millers who were being paid in sacks of flour that they were milling, they couldn't store it. So they had spoilage and pests and all kinds of things. They lost it. So if they converted into beer, they kept it for longer. People liked it. There wasn't refrigeration, so it didn't last a long time, and that sort of then moved along to spirits, and they started distilling, and you could hold the value of those crops for a longer period of time, and they're more tradable, easier to transport. So, these are businesses that are rooted in the history of the development of this country in North America, and are, as I said, each one of them is physically attached to the farm community. So when people talk about local, people think of bread and different kinds of meats and different things. We're all the same, right? We all are anchored on different kinds of farms in this province and across the country.
Do we not appreciate that as much as you think we should? Because when we think of hard booze, we still maybe think of Scotch, or we think of Jack Daniels, and those are both foreign products.
Well, the fact that people say things like hard booze or hard liquor.
I knew you were going to take. You object to my use of that term.
Well, I don't object. They're common usage. When I worked in the beer industry, for a long time. We took great delight in saying hard liquor, right? Because it kind of evokes, the old imagery is a guy sitting on the back of a motorcycle with a bottle of Jack, right? Or doing tequila shots. Well, guess what? the world's changed. We've all moved on from that. That really doesn't happen. That's not the mainstream anymore. But those images linger and they overshadow the business, right? And they overshadow the business so much that they begin to affect how people think about it and make decisions, and ultimately how government decides policy.
But you don't want us thinking about your product as kind of delicate in the way we think of wine, do you?
Absolutely.
You do?
Absolutely. Huh. So, we make some of the best whiskeys in the world, and people that are drink whiskey. And remember, most people drink everything. There are very few people that only drink one thing. It's occasion, it's what's available, it's convenience. All those things come into play. And as I say, you might have a preference. I had the good fortune to work in all of the businesses, so I've enjoyed all of them. But people will drink everything, and the most inveterate wine drinkers I know still have their favorite spirit. Some of them drink rum, some of them drink whiskey.
In fact, what you may not know, vodka. Just for you. It's all vodka today on the program.
Thank you.
No, it's not. I'm kidding. Matt, back to you.
Yes.
The biggest challenge for craft brewers in Ontario these days is what?
I think access to consumers. I think we all struggle with this. There are very strict limits on how we can sell beer, where we can sell beer, when we can sell beer. Everyone knows about, basically the LCBO is one of the only channels. With beer, we're a little more fortunate. We also have the beer store, but a lot of people, I think the majority of Ontarians don't actually know that the beer store is essentially a foreign-owned monopoly. When it started, it was sort of post-prohibition. The government was trying to lessen the restrictions, and they didn't trust people as much with hard liquor and wine, but they thought, okay, beer's 5%, we can let the brewers sort of handle it themselves. And they basically created this co-op of all the brewers at the time, which was about 40 or 50 companies. But as the larger guys, the Anheuser-Busch InBevs and the Molson Coors, basically started buying up all these smaller guys and became these massive companies, it's now owned, I think, 95% by 3 foreign-owned companies.
Now,
So,
having said that, the provincial government has, of course, liberalized, right use of the word, I think, liberalized the sale of beer in the province of Ontario now. You can get it at the grocery stores.
somewhat, yeah.
Does that help you?
It definitely does. Grocery has been a great new channel for us. I think we're in about 150 stores now that have licenses, and they're hoping to grow that to 450 by 2025, which is still forever away. So that is great, and we can sell from our front door. We can have a retail shop at our brewery. The problem is, I, as a beer lover, a beer connoisseur, can't decide I'm going to open my own bottle shop and go down the street and get a storefront and open a well-curated shop. If I go across the border to Detroit, there's bottle shops there where I can go to the back, get a beer at the bar, and spend my day walking around the store, talking to the guy, asking about different bottles, buy all these things, and then just drive right back across the border.
So you think it needs even more liberalizing?
I do. I don't think there's any reason why people should be able to buy cigarettes at a corner store and not be allowed to buy beer or wine or spirits, for that matter.
Okay, Caroline, how about for you? For the wineries in Prince Edward County, what's the biggest challenge?
I would echo my colleague's statement. In fact, sometimes we sit around and we say, we want what beer's got.
Which is what?
In the way we see it, we're even more restricted. I can sell at my farm gate. I can sell through the LCBO. We've seen some of that liberalization, but by 2025, we'll have 150 outlets to the 450, and no beer store.
But you would, just so I understand, would you like the option of, say, you and a bunch of the other wineries in Prince Edward County deciding you want to open up your own Prince Edward County wine shop in downtown Ottawa or something like that?
I would say, why not? I have from the beginning, since I started this, saying that the model that licenses, private licenses, make a lot of sense and allow the operators to choose their mix, and would probably create a lot more interest. In the interim, having the same access as beer and cider seems to me to be necessary for fairness.
But that scenario I just presented, that's illegal right now, right?
It is.
You can't do that.
No, you cannot.
And if you tried to do it? They'd shut you down.
They would.
I guess they would, right.
They would.
How about for you, Jen? Biggest challenge right now to selling spirits in the province?
Access, as Matt said, and tax load. So,
Tax load?
Tax load. So,
Meaning what?
when we sell a typical bottle of, let's say, whiskey,
You know what?
whiskey
We
that
got a
people
chart.
would know.
Should we bring this chart up? Go ahead, Sheldon. Bring this chart up because I think this will help Jen make his point. Okay, that's you on the left, right?
Yep.
Okay, take us through it.
So these are all standard drinks. So a standard drink is 5 ounces of table wine at about 12%, bottle of beer at 5% alcohol, and a mixed drink, say a whiskey and rye and ginger at 1.5 ounces at 40%. They all contain exactly the same amount of alcohol, 17.05. So as you can see on the left, the Ontario government takes 60%, 59.2% of the value. On beer, they take 15%, and this is VQA wine sold in a winery retail store or an on-site winery. And on beer, they take about 31%. So it's
Why do they tax, I'm going to use the expression here, don't get mad at me, Jan. Why do they tax hard liquor harder than the other products?
because it goes to some of those old attitudes we just talked about, right? They have these perceptions that go back, in some cases, a century. Everybody remembers Gin Lane and the bad things that happened in England in Gin Lane, and those attitudes continue to overhang and condition the way people think about this stuff. So, to a certain extent, it's accidents of history, and then, of course, government becomes wedded to the money and trying to deal with that and fix that.
So do you want them taxed at a higher rate?
No, I don't think that's the answer. I don't think that's the answer. Well, you know, let's be honest. I worked in the wine business for 7 years. I worked in the beer business for 11 years. They're great businesses. They all make terrific contributions. I think what we're saying is that, guys, we're all the same. It's time for the governments to sort of make a little more progress and start to level the playing field. It doesn't do us any good if the other guys are penalized, right? That actually doesn't help my business.
Do you know whether it affects your sales because the tax rate on your product is much higher than the tax rate on their product?
I do think it does. I can't give you any specifics. I will tell you what does affect our sales is that, you know, when I worked for the beer industry, there were 460 beer stores. You know, we've now seen the explosion of craft brewers. Most of them have their own stores. Mm-hmm. We are restricted to only selling through the LCBO. So you can have a store at your distillery, but the taxation is so prohibitive, you lose money on every bottle you sell. So most of our guys don't sell, don't have an on-site store. 40 Creek in Grimsby is really the only one, and then Hiram Walker's just reopened a store to test it now that there's some new changes coming. So
Where's the Hiram Walker one?
in Windsor.
In Windsor, okay.
Which is the largest distillery in North America. So
If I gave you the proverbial magic wand and said you could change one thing about provincial policy as it relates to your product, what would the thing be?
Well, we don't understand why, when the government chose to expand into grocery stores, why spirits were excluded.
So you think they should be included?
Well, I think if we're going to open up the market, everybody should have the same access to the consumer. We're all competitive businesses. We all make great products. We'll duke it out, and you know, some days we'll win, some days Caroline will win, some days Matt will win. Right? That's the nature of the market, the kind of free market that we live in.
Do we assume that you don't have the same access to grocery stores as beer and wine do because the government takes a somewhat old-fashioned attitude to your product, that it's somehow harsher or more dangerous than theirs?
I think that's part of it. We do hear those comments from time to time. If you go and talk to CAMH, or you go and talk to MAD, or you go and talk to any of those, any of the addictions or the public health, they'll say that's ridiculous. You know, if all of these products, if you use them properly, they'll probably all do you some good. And if you use them improperly, they're going to the possibility of harm. So the public gets it, consumers get it. You know, we have these things that were created 3 or 4 years ago, the low risk drinking guidelines, which help people understand what they're drinking, how much they're drinking, because more and more Ontarians want to know what they're drinking. They want to be sure. They want to be doing it in a safe and as healthy way as possible. So the public's there. The government just takes a long time to catch up.
Okay. We're going to add a couple of more voices to this conversation to talk about the consumption end of this success story. And while we do, please have a look at this. In terms of alcoholic beverages, a standard size beer or cooler is equivalent to a shot of liquor or a glass of wine. And here's what the Canadian Centre on Substance Abuse advises for those enjoying a few. 'Tis the season after all. Set limits for yourself and stick to them. Drink slowly. Have no more than 2 drinks in any 3 hours. For every drink of alcohol, have 1 non-alcoholic drink. Eat before and while you are drinking. Okay, we have talked craft, economics, and policy. Now, what do these fine local libations bring to the dining table? Joining us now on that, the happy pairing of Ontario food and drink, we welcome our resident culinary expert. There's Joshna Maharaj, the chef and food activist, and Jamie Kennedy of Jamie Kennedy Kitchens. We're happy to have you guys back with us this week. Hello, and we welcome back, of course, the folks we've been talking to. Matt Gibson, the brand manager of Nickelbrook Brewing Company in Burlington. Caroline Granger, the winemaker and owner of the Grange of Prince Edward Vineyards and Estate Winery. And Jan Westcott, CEO of Spirits Canada. Joshna, I want to pick up on, we understand the relationship of alcohol to what these three do.
Yes.
But I want to pick up on the angle where you enter the discussion, which is as it relates to food.
Yes.
What is your kind of relationship with alcohol as it relates to food?
It's quite broad, actually, and it's interesting because professionally it fits, and I have often wished that we had freer access to alcohol, right? And that you could in fact go to a grocery store and grab a bottle of wine or some beer or a bottle of spirit for something.
Well, those days are here now.
They are, but I'd like it to be a little wider, right? It seems a more full experience, bit more of a civilized thing. We're all grown adults; we can manage ourselves, right? The notion of this regulation feels a bit silly now.
You see, there's still a bit of a prohibitionist attitude towards
really
alcohol
is.
in the province.
100%, and I get that there's a huge revenue piece at stake here, and that's really what makes this not move. But come on.
Okay. How about you, Jamie, when you're cooking, the role that alcohol plays in what you do? Tell us about it.
Well, again, I'm going to echo something that Carolyn said in the downtime, maybe, that wine is food. I think these agricultural products, whether they're fermented or distilled or served fresh, all kind of belong on the table with each other during the experience of a meal. So I can't think of having a meal that's prepared with local food, because as you know, Steve, I'm a champion of locally produced foods and wines, and it's very exciting for me, and beers, and it's very exciting and spirits. It's very exciting. Very exciting for me to check in on the harmonies that occur. They're terroir-based harmonies in food and wine and beer and spirits, because coming from the same soil, coming from a group of people who all are part of a community, there are certain things that happen that bring those things together that result in a taste experience that's harmonious.
Joshna, when you cook,
Yes.
how often are you adding alcohol, adding wine, adding beer to whatever it is that you're making? I don't mean as a separate drink, I mean as part of the mix.
It happens quite often, particularly in the winter season. There's temptation when you're doing lots of braising to throw a can of beer in, or so you deglaze a pan with a bit of brandy or something lovely like that. Red wine, braising things in red wine is gorgeous, right? And it really adds a very distinct flavor, I find, right? There's really no way to replicate that any other way. A stout in a roast, in a pot roast or a brisket or something like that is delicious.
Do you have any idea, Jan, how much of your business comes from not people buying a bottle and drinking it, but rather including it in a broader culinary experience?
It's emerging. It's infant at the moment. There's been the classic scenarios where people use the things for flambéing and the brandy, different things. It's emerging. Again, it's these attitudes that people have had. Millennials are fantastic. They will drink anything at any occasion, at any time. Whereas people that are a little bit older are fixed in the way they would look at things, and they're approaching food and cooking and what they eat differently as well. So you're seeing more of it. It's mostly by younger people. It's still in its infancy. People have been using, as I say, more of the classics like brandy and cognac. But you're starting to see some of it come in. Some of the more avant-garde people are doing it. To be honest, a little bit of its novelty right now, we'll have to get through the novelty stage and to get to where you are and saying, wow, this really adds a dimension that there's no other way to get there. It's experimentation. It'll come. The small distillers are going to drive that a little faster than the big distillers. I mean, they're bringing that innovation, and that'll be good. And so we'll see more and more of that.
Can I share a weird beer story with you?
Yeah, me.
My mother is going to throttle me for this, but when I was a kid, and she would, like 5, 6, 7 years old, and she would take me to the hairdressers to watch her have her hair done. She used to wash her hair with beer. They used to do that back then. I think I remember that.
I've
right?
heard that. Apparently, it makes it's. I've heard it's like an old world European thing that makes you have like super thick hair. I knew an Italian guy who swore that everybody in his family, he said every Italian man showers with beer, and that's why we have such thick, luscious hair. I've never tried it. I have used beard oils that have beer extracts in them or hop extracts. I don't know. I know hops are a preservative. I don't know if that has anything to do with hair, though.
I'm passing this along because it's a marketing opportunity for you.
We can start making beer shampoos, beer soap. Beer soap is a thing. It smells great. If you want to smell like a brewery, then go for it. There's no better smell to me than a fresh batch of wort being boiled up. It's incredible. It's sweet and cereally, and it's like being outside of a bakery, but there's beer inside.
Nice. Caroline, you want to add to that? You ever washed your hair with beer?
No.
How about with wine?
Oh, every harvest. Although I really wouldn't recommend it.
Not on purpose. You know, the one thing, and Jamie, let me get you in on this. I mean, because you've been in the restaurant business, I think we need a better understanding here of how much of the bottom line is dependent on what these folks do for every restaurant's bottom line. Without alcohol, could restaurants make a go of it?
Breakfast joints make a go of it, Steve. Not too many people are drinking alcohol in the morning in this province.
Fair point. How about a lunch or dinner place?
Becomes more difficult. I think as a restaurateur, I depended on that segment of my sales. My total sales, I think, reflected maybe 30% alcohol sales, 70% food. Much higher than that at certain restaurants that I've had over the years. The wine bar, for example, was approaching 50-50, and I loved that. I thought that was a great accomplishment because it tells a story that not only I have this ideology that people should have drink and food in the same place, but that was something that was sinking in with my customers as well.
You sound, if I may infer, if I may read between the lines, you sound like you have a bias towards wine, as opposed to beer or spirits. Fair to say?
When I'm dining, yes, that is fair to say. But I did want to engage with. Well, I was going to say, I think that's a fairly common bias that the wine industry has done a great job of sort of placing themselves at the dinner table, and the beer industry historically has shown images of sitting on the beach or mowing your lawn and having a cold bud.
Watching the game.
Exactly. And I really do think...
Or the pub.
Yeah, or the pub. And I really do think that there is a place for good, high-quality beer at a fine dining table. I did a 5-course beer dinner with Chef Laura Kirk at Ruby Watchco last year, and she, not only did we pair each course with one of our beers, but she also integrated each beer into each course. And so we did everything from a chocolate stout with a stout cake that she had made to she used a cucumber lime sour goza that we made and turned that into a salad dressing for a cod salad. So there's a huge diversity, especially when you have, as I was saying, these smaller craft brewers are making more than just your basic yellow lager. You have this huge diversity of flavors that I think rivals wine, and not to put down wine at all, but I'm saying I think there's a place at the table for both, and we even get to the point where we use wine barrels and bourbon barrels to age our beer, so we're combining those flavors and bringing that all together.
Let me see if there's okay, I get the beer during the meal, I get the wine during the meal. One place we have not yet gone is spirits during the meal. You have spirits before the meal, but I don't know too many people who are sort of having their steak and doing a whiskey shot at the same time.
Well, actually, we've done some experimenting. I wouldn't say that all spirits go well through the meal, but certainly lots of the gins will go through a meal very well. You're not mixing it with too much, maybe tonic. So there are things, and after dinner drinks, to Jamie's point about different kinds of liqueurs, bringing aperitifs and eau de vie, bringing different taste sensations. Certainly those have been around. We've, in the last 40 years, we've kind of lost that capacity in North America to appreciate those things. They are definitely coming back. Yeah. You're seeing more of them. You're seeing some local production of those things. So it's growing, but you're right. It's still people tend to think, okay, I'll have a Manhattan or an old fashioned or something like that before I actually sit down at the table. It will be my relaxation. I'll get in the mood kind of thing, and that's very true. I mean, that's part of what happens, and then there are also, and the chefs will know this far better than me. It also conditions you to be ready to eat. Because after you've had a drink, there's that little hunger pain that comes in, and you're starting to.
You're just in the mood.
You're feeling flush, you're feeling good, and I think it enhances appetite to a certain extent, and so we're still in those patterns. But again, policy comes back into that, because if some things are harder to find and more expensive and all of those things, then the public's ability to go down these different roads is limited, and that's the sort of the challenge that we're all facing.
Josh, now put a bow on it for us.
It should also be said, though, let's broaden our cultural understanding, because there's a delicious sake distillery here in Ontario, in Toronto, and sake is consumed throughout a meal. In Japanese culture, right? It's very delicious, made right here in Ontario. It's beautiful, and can take you happily right through that meal.
Well, as we know, good things grow.
That's it.
In Ontario. I want to thank everybody for coming in for this discussion tonight, and I want to remind everybody watching us, let us all drink responsibly through this holiday season. Right on. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers. Yes, exactly. Cheers.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.